everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politically Depressed. As always, I'm your host, Eamon McAdam. Today is the 30th of September. I'm recording this at 1 a.m. I'm making a note of the time and the date because, as you may have noticed, I've been doing a lot more episodes and recordings, and the reasons for that is quite obvious because the aggression on Lebanon has escalated. It is just a full-on war at this point, as far as the Israelis are concerned, as far as we're concerned. And yeah, so a lot of stuff is happening, and there's a lot of stuff I want to share, and there's a lot of stuff I want to explore and express through this. And so yeah, I'm going to be doing more episodes in general. Also, for those who are more used to listening to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast, I'm now uploading these videos or these episodes onto YouTube, and sometimes there actually is video of me, in the flesh. And so, yeah, if you want to see me as I speak, this episode is not with video because I don't really feel up for it. Check it out on YouTube. I honestly, would prefer more people to listen through YouTube because I get those ad dollars. I get those like 5 cents, but they add up. But anyway, yes, so it's been fucked. This last week has been unbelievable, incredibly surreal, unbelievably fucked after everything we've seen the Israelis do in Gaza. After every attempt at pushing back, at stopping them, at whatever. Not every attempt, but, they're still hungry, They're still fucking not satiated by the complete destruction, by the killings of hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza, but they're really turning their sights on Lebanon and doing, I don't know, I shouldn't be surprised because they're doing kind of what, God, I get so tense when I talk about this because I cannot believe that they are using the Gaza playbook on Lebanon. And it's really getting no pushback. It is just kind of just accepted in the sort of Western world, in the whatever. There are speeches, there's rhetoric, but this isn't being treated for the massive escalation that it is. They killed Hassan Nasrallah. I really cannot explain to people who haven't been, let's say, following, but even those who have been following for years, it is very difficult to explain. He's been the head of the party my whole life. Ever since I was alive, he's always just been there. And there's just this feeling of his undying nature. But regardless, it is a massive escalation to kill him. The most massive. And the explosives they used to kill him, these 85 tons of explosives that just destroyed completely an entire block. 6 buildings just vanished. I don't know if people have seen these images. There's not this rubble and deterioration and whatever. It's like the buildings turned into sand because of just how much explosives there were, and by the nature of these explosions. And these are bunker busters because the command center is all the way down in some tunnels. And so we don't know how many people died. It's going to sound very funny. Not funny, but, unbelievable, literally. The health ministry, the official numbers are still that 2 people died. And 50 were injured. I saw an Instagram story by someone who is an emergency doctor who works at an emergency wing of I don't know which hospital. But he wrote that he wasn't called in because there were no bodies. And they officially said, not officially, but the term they used is vanished. They disappeared. They were vanquished. God knows how many humans, how many people. Haaretz is the only one that I've seen people parrot, like sort of repeat this number, that it's estimated, their estimates are 300 people. Just eviscerated, just disappeared, vanished. It's unfucking believable, and the bombs have not stopped since. There's not been a moment to be able to just understand what the fuck happened, the significance of that moment. They just keep going. It's honestly one of the most brutal scenes I've ever seen, things that I've ever witnessed. And it just, after something so momentous, give it a fucking second. It's insane. That night I did not sleep because the Israelis were bombing Beirut and other parts of the country, especially Baalbek and the Ba'a. All night, the entire night, I was watching a live stream on Al Jazeera of my city getting bombed. Every 10-20 minutes, there's a new explosion. I think that night they dropped between 70 to 90 airstrikes or attacks. Some report also by sea that for the first time since the 2006 war, that the Israelis are using their naval capacities to bombard Lebanon. It's insane. And so, obviously, as a Lebanese person, as someone whose family is directly affected by this, whose friends, I'm just so fucking terrified by all this, and just having witnessed and experienced sort of from afar what's happened in Gaza, what is increasingly happening in the West Bank, but different tactics, but actually no, because they've replicated the Gaza tactics in Jenin, and now they're doing full scale in Lebanon. And it's honestly terrifying because not only do they have the military capacity to completely just rip out of existence 300 bodies, but then the Americans come out with their statements, Biden and then Harris, and both of them don't even mention the civilians, don't even mention. And so this is something that's huge, which is what some people describe as the Overton window, although I really think there needs to be a more kind of significant phrase, something that just embodies a bit more how intense and serious and urgent this is. But basically they came out with praise because this was a targeted assassination that killed Hassan Nasrallah, right? And there's not really even a mention. And then also the sophisticated nature, these bunker busters or whatever, how they knew his location and when he was there. And there's this complete lack of awareness or recognition of the intense amount of just general violence. I don't know how to describe this. 85 tons. You do not need to have this sophisticated whatever for 85 tons. And the same they're doing in Gaza. And this is essentially the Gaza playbook. That in order to take out Hamas, and again, these are bullshit terms, but let's stick even with those bullshit terms, because I think there is genocide even built within their own terms, basically. That, I don't know, if you listen or read or watch anything about the first Intifada, watching it now with what's happening in Gaza, there's this constant feeling of, and it's going to sound really strange, of restraint on the part of the Israelis. They were horrendous, they're brutal. I'm not saying anything like that. What I'm saying is that compared to now how almost permissible and acceptable it is their complete destruction of Gaza, because there is this group, and because they say that it's whatever, and because all this bullshit, that for just, it's not just the Western world, just what is kind of acceptable amounts of violence, and especially in urban warfare. What are the kind of quote-unquote rules of engagement? And I know all of this is very bullshit, and all these terms are bullshit, and they're all constructs, and they're always exceptions, and I don't know. I don't know. It's absolutely fucked and it's lunacy. And there's this constant question being asked, which again, I think accepting that shift of this so-called Overton window, I should say, people mostly use this term Overton window to talk about language. Like, what is the space of acceptable language? Or the N word, for example. I mean, the very fact that I, obviously say the N word, don't say the actual word, that is a very good example of the Overton window, that's shifted because of activism and resistance and the kind of whatever, a lot of reasons, but basically it's this description of what is accepted. So, for instance, the R word is making a comeback all of a sudden. I have no idea why. Like, I'm seeing full on Twitter and stuff, like, all of a sudden, people are just using the R word. Like, it's just, oh, that's just a normal thing to say now. And that's one that, like, shifted in my lifetime and then back. But yeah, so I definitely don't think Overton window is a good term to use in this context because it's quite a weak and, like, boring term. I don't know, I'll think about it. But basically, we've seen over the last year, honestly, October 17 of last year was a moment that was not clocked for what it was. I think a lot of us did feel it. It is when the Israelis bombed, I think it was Al-Shifa? No, Al-Ahli hospital. Al-Ahli? I think so. It was this massive massacre, and it was one of the first major attacks of a hospital, and it was reported about 500 people were killed. And almost instantly, the Israelis came up with their bullshit, and it was just, they had to come up with all this stuff. There was a command center, there was something that was a high target, and there was a moment there, and, like, a lot of people went out in the streets spontaneously. Like, I remember it was like 11:12, and I was reporting, I was like reposting all these different places that people were coming out at midnight, at 1 a.m. and whatever. And the Israelis clearly waited for, this is what the whole year has been like. They do this horrible stuff and then they kind of wait and they kind of get a green light. Or rather, and it's really disgusting, does anyone know this phrase, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission? That is what it feels like sometimes with the Israelis when it comes to the US, basically, where they just do this horrible, fucked up atrocity crimes and wait a few seconds. The US doesn't say anything. They come out, they say this stupid genocidal bullshit. They have the right to defend themselves. And then they just, oh, okay, so it's fine to bomb hospitals, then medics, then schools, then, just the list goes on and on and on. Humanitarian zones. All these things were red lines, and then they crossed them, and the Americans didn't say shit. So, like, Rafah. And so, basically, they feel like they've done that already. They've gotten all the green lights, and so they're going full force in Lebanon. They have bombed hospitals, they have killed medics, they killed some journalists, they killed UN workers, they are killing indiscriminately. By and large, they are bombing indiscriminately and creating mass terror amongst the population, who again are already so fucked because of the economic collapse. And I don't know, people are still kind of sleeping. I have no idea. And honestly, I think a lot of us are incredibly sort of in despair because all of us have been paying attention to what's happening in Gaza. A lot of us, especially people in Lebanon, not only feel and sympathize and empathize, but also for the last year, we have our own history with with Zionist violence and occupation, and not that long ago. And so there's this despair that the world wasn't able to stop what they've done in Gaza, and all these people's efforts and all the kind of tactics that people have been using and whatever has not stopped the Israelis in Gaza. And so, I don't know. there isn't the same feeling of what you need to do, go out on the streets, go on whatever, because it feels like that hasn't worked. And at the moment, I know a lot of us don't have the energy to kind of imagine what could work. Um, but I hope people are still paying attention, are still aware of how this is a fascist expansionary structure, colonial project that honestly, again, the question that people have been asking a lot is what is the end game? And the title is that's all I can see. That's all they're showing us. That basically what they've done in Gaza. And there's no plan, but this is the plan. What do you intend to do with the people? Whatever happens to them. There is no plan outside of we will just destroy and kill until we are not only the strongest, but basically the only player in town. And yeah, I think that's it. I kind of shocked a friend of mine when I told them that The Last of Us, one of the writers, one of the creators, is an Israeli who grew up in an illegal settlement in the West Bank. And for those that know how sci-fi is, we're human. We're not, even artists can't conjure something up that's not in some way connected to reality in some shape or form, oftentimes in ways they don't even know. But this is the idea of coding within sci-fi. And so, for instance, the story of alien invaders is oftentimes a code, again, sometimes subliminally, of the refugee, of the immigrant, or of zombies, the bodies of those that are dead. Perhaps you killed them. I mean, this is why in US white culture, there's so much, in terms of the living dead around Indian, what they call Indian burial sites, indigenous Americans. And so there's that anxiety of what if the people we exterminated came back and they wanted revenge. And so anyway, The Last of Us, I don't know much about it. I haven't read it. I haven't really approached it, especially since I discovered that. Is a kind of model, of that kind of imaginary. I mean, it's pretty fucked, but actually, I don't know enough about the story to comment too much. But the idea of the dystopia, but the dystopia from a state's perspective where it will still be in control. And so that's it. Domination. Domination for the sake of domination. And I really think it just boils all down to that. I know this is a very geopolitical analysis, and obviously, these are geopolitical thinkers and players, and so they think in these terms, and obviously it'll never manifest in the way they plan because there's constantly going to be resistance, because people will always resist genocide because it is fucking horrendous, and we have no other choice. There is no other choice but resistance. Because in the face of this genocidal regime, the only other alternative is just to roll over and die or accept subjugation. And people just do not accept that and won't accept that. And people across the region won't accept it. And the only reason there hasn't been more of a surge, more of an upswell, is because of these fucked up authoritarian collaborator Arab regimes. If it wasn't for Sisi, if it wasn't for King Abdullah, honestly, if it wasn't for Assad, and honestly, I don't want to get too much into it because there's a whole discussion about it, but it really seems like Assad and Iran just kind of fully betrayed Hezbollah. I think, this was the plan in terms of they're going to come for us, then you come to my defense. They let Nasrallah get killed, essentially. And they're just letting Hezbollah, and with it, Lebanon, just be destroyed. And, yeah, it's kind of a bit fucked up. I'm commenting a bit on this. Because there's this article that's been out about how, because of Hezbollah's participation and in Syria, and essentially being used by the regime, not just used by them, but yeah, used as a tool by the regime and Iran to crush the Syrian revolution and basically sectarianize it and then sort of dominate whatever certain areas, that they, lost a lot of their security capabilities, or their kind of like secrecy, or their kind of hold on shit, because they had to share a lot of information with the Syrians, with the Russians. And that's how, as they claim, Hezbollah's kind of ring of secrecy or security was kind of penetrated and completely compromised by the Israelis, as we've seen over the last week. Fuck, so much has happened. I can't. But anyway, the reason that I bring up that article is because while that may be all true, I think there's also a lack of recognition, especially from publications like FT, like Financial Times, and like all these liberal whatever, of the fact that this wasn't, they had great information and they went on it and they whatever, without 85 tons of explosives, and without it being just already acceptable, that hundreds would die in the process, hundreds of innocent civilians, that wanton destruction of, a city. So basically what's happened, what the Gaza moment is that it is acceptable to destroy a city. I'm getting really worried, and I'm sort of losing it, but I'm still here. Khalas, no. Like I've said, I'm losing it. But anyway, I do want to do more episodes. I'm going to share a lot of the stuff that's been happening. I don't think I'm going to be able to do daily updates or whatever. For those that are interested in daily updates, Megaphone, the public source is pretty good, but it's not daily. But yeah, so I'm going to do more of these, and more episodes, more stuff online, because I don't know. Obviously, shit's happening now, in my own home. And of course, as always, these episodes are going to increasingly become more kind of, not incomprehensible, but a bit more messy, because my mind is obviously a lot more messy, and so is my heart. And yeah, so I don't know, I guess I'll wrap it up there. That's been another episode of Politically Depressed. As always, if you want to support this podcast, there's the Patreon and the tip jar below. Please leave a review or just a rating wherever you're listening. If you're listening to this on YouTube, like and subscribe and turn on that notification window, because I'm pretty sure I'm being shadow banned on YouTube. I googled it, it is a thing. I'm not just paranoid. And yeah, anyway, tell your friends, tell your family, and stay safe. And yeah, I'll see you all next time.